So we're going to look at the Apostle Nathaniel this evening. We're going to read 1 John chapter 45 through verse 51. We find an interaction with Jesus, Philip, and Nathaniel here. And I don't want you to take my word for it, so we'll take his word for it. Philip findeth Nathanael, and saith unto him, We have found him, of whom Moses in the law and the prophets did write, Jesus of Nazareth, the son of Joseph. And Nathanael said unto him, Can there any good thing come out of Nazareth? Philip saith unto him, Come and see. We talked a couple of weeks ago, maybe last week, of how Philip was I have to see it to believe it. Really, doubting Thomas, he took a lot of the blame, but it could have been doubting Philip, because there were multiple times Philip said, Show me the Father. I need to see it to believe it. And here, this fits Philip's personality perfectly. Can anything good come out of Nazareth? He's questioning the validity of Philip's statement. And what did he say? Just come and see. You just got to see it for yourself. Let's keep going. Jesus saw Nathanael coming to him, an Israelite indeed, in whom is no guile. Nathanael saith unto him, Whence knowest thou me? Jesus answered and said unto him, Before that Philip called thee, when thou wast under the fig tree, I saw thee. Nathanael answered and saith unto him, Rabbi, whatever Jesus saw, whatever Jesus knew about Nathanael, whether it was just the fact that Jesus knew where he was and Nathanael thought he was in a secret place where nobody saw him, and just the fact that Jesus knew he was there, whether that was what triggered him to believe that Jesus was the Christ, the Messiah, or whether it was the fact that maybe there was something intimate that happened there, maybe, I don't know, wrong, but something where Jesus said, I saw you under the fig tree. And instantly Nathanael says, Rabbi, thou art the Son of God, thou art the King of Israel. It'll be interesting maybe in the future in heaven to be able to find out what happened under the fig tree. Jesus answered and saith unto him, Because I believest thou, thou shalt see greater things than these. And he saith unto him, shall see heaven open and the angels of God ascending and descending upon the Son of Man. Is that me or is that me? I feel like it's cutting in and out. No? I want to make sure it's in my pocket. Philip had an honest desire to learn about Christ. He goes and he sees. And his first reaction after meeting Jesus is, I've got to go and tell somebody. I've got to bring somebody else to meet him. The guy that he thought of was Nathaniel. So he goes and finds him, and he compels Nathaniel to come and see Jesus. So let's take a look at Nathaniel's background. He was from Cana of Galilee, as many of the disciples were. We find that hard facts in John chapter 21, verse 2. There were together Simon Peter and Thomas called Didymus and Nathanael of Cana in Galilee. You'll recall a couple of notable things that happened in Cana of Galilee. Of course, Jesus' first miracle, where he turned water to wine, happened in Cana of Galilee. And then also down the road, you have the nobleman's son, or the nobleman who comes and asks Jesus to heal his dying son. And because of the man's faith, Jesus heals him. And the nobleman goes back in faith and finds that his son was healed. Those two things in particular happened in Cana of Galilee, where Nathanael was from. A little bit more about Nathanael's background. His name, Nathanael, means God has given. God has given. Perhaps his parents struggled to have children at the beginning. Or maybe it was their difficulty for one reason or another, and they felt compelled to name their son God has given. At the very least, they recognized that their son was a gift from God, and they wanted to name him such. So his name means God has given, but then he was also known by another name. I'm going to ask someone turn to Mark chapter 3, verse 18. And who's going to do it? Raise your hand if you're going to turn there. Brother Ethan's going to go there, and then we got Luke chapter 6, verse 14. Who's going there? Dad. Mark chapter 3, verse 18, Luke chapter 6, verse 14. We have another name for Nathanael, Bartholomew. And you'll notice these two verses here are going to be listing the apostles, the disciples, and we're going to find Bartholomew listed in there. And he's always listed with Philip, and it's just been accepted that Nathaniel is Bartholomew, because if you do the math with how many disciples there were 12. If you added Bartholomew and Nathaniel separately, you'd have 13. A baker's dozen, they didn't have that, so we take it that because Bartholomew is always listed with Philip, that would be just another name for Nathaniel. Ethan.
And Andrew and Philip and Bartholomew and Matthew and Thomas and James the son of Alphaeus and Thaddeus and Simon.
And Bartholomew, he has called us too. Very good. Dad.
Simon, whom we also named Peter, and Andrew his brother, James and John, Philip and Bartholomew.
Excellent. And then one more reference, if you wanted to have a sweep of Matthew, Mark, Luke, you'd have Matthew chapter 10 and verse 3, all referencing Bartholomew. Bartholomew means son of Talmai, Talmai. It's possible that Nathaniel was a descendant of the Talmai mentioned in 2 Samuel chapter 3. We have time. Let's flip over there. Let's go to 2 Samuel. Say, boy, you're thinking outside, but right up against the box there, going to 2 Samuel. That's a Sunday morning message joke. 2 Samuel chapter 3, verse 3 says, And as second, Chilead of Abigail, the wife of Nabal the Carmelite. And the third, Absalom, the son of Maacah, the daughter of Talmai, king of Geshur. Talmai was Absalom's biological grandfather. So, if Bartholomew's name meant son of Talmai, and in fact it was the one referenced here, that was referenced in 2 Samuel, then Nathaniel could have possibly been in the lineage and descendant of King David, which would be interesting because way he would have also been related to Jesus in the family tree. So that's just an interesting little tidbit there that you could study out for yourself and little food for thought. Let's keep moving though. Nathaniel's character, his character traits, his personality. First of all, really two things stand out. He was knowledgeable. He had knowledge of the law. Notice, Philip findeth Nathanael. This is in verse 45 of John chapter 1. Philip findeth Nathanael and saith unto him, We have found him, of whom Moses in the law and the prophets did write, Jesus of Nazareth, the son of Joseph. Now, Nathanael knew the law. He knew the Old Testament. He knew the Scriptures. So, if he knew the Scriptures inside and out, he would know that Jesus was supposed to be born in Bethlehem, not in Nazareth. So when Philip comes and says, hey, we found him, the Messiah, Jesus of Nazareth, that would send off a warning sign in Nathanael's mind and say, whoa, you're claiming he is the Messiah, but the Messiah is not coming from Nazareth. The Messiah is coming from Bethlehem. So Nathanael saith unto him, can there any good thing come out of Nazareth? He's not necessarily questioning or putting down Nazareth. He's just saying, is the Messiah supposed to come from somewhere else? Philip saith unto him, you just got to come and see. I don't know the answer. I feel like I've been there a lot of times, especially as a younger person, as a young adult, as a teenager. And someone asks you a Bible question and you have no idea. And you know you have the truth, and you know somebody who knows the answer, but you don't know it right there. And you got to come and see. You should talk to my pastor. He knows, you know. Nathanael knew the old prophecies. He knew about the Messiah. He knew that Jesus was to be born in Bethlehem. When Philip told him that they had found the Messiah, Nathanael showed skepticism. But Philip invited him to come and see. He didn't argue with Philip. He didn't get out well, let's go take a look at the scrolls. And they laid it out and they did a big 10-week dissertation. He just said, you got to come and see. You got to experience Jesus for yourself. And here's one thing that we learn from that. The most effective way to witness is not to argue with people. It's simply to show them the Lord, introduce them to Jesus, and then let the Lord take it from there. He will do the work that you can't do through the power of His Holy Spirit, through the power of His Word. You standing on a porch and arguing with someone is going to do zero good. Really, I've found generally when someone has enough knowledge to challenge me about the Bible, they have a good amount of knowledge and they're going to make you look bad really fast. And that's not where we want to go. All right? It's about presenting them Jesus. It's our job to make the gospel available, not acceptable, and then let Him do the work from there. So what do we find out about Nathanael? His personality, he's a knowledgeable guy, and also he's an honest man. Jesus says something interesting about him right when he sees him. When he sees Peter, what does he say? He said, you're going to be called Little Rock. Peter's name was Simon Peter. Simon means unstable, and Peter means rock. He was solid as they come sometimes, and sometimes he was just a goober. And that's what Jesus said right when he met him. He knew who he was. Jesus says something right off the bat about Nathaniel. In verse 47, Jesus saw Nathanael coming to him and saith of him, Behold, an Israelite indeed, in whom is no guile. That word guile in the Greek means deceit, slyness, or trickery. Nathanael was a straight shooter. He didn't try to bait you into saying something or getting you caught up in your words. He didn't try to deceive people. He didn't try to ensnare them. But why would the Lord have called him honest? Because he was an honest man. But what do we see in his life that would have, where that honesty would have played out? Well, he trusted the Messiah, not the law. That was countercultural. And also, he asked the hard questions that no one else wanted to ask. He trusted the Messiah, not the law. Notice this. The Jews believed that if they followed the letter of the law, that they were going to be okay. They were so caught up in, but the scriptures say, hey, Jesus, why do your disciples eat with unwashed hands? Hey, Jesus, why did you make him pick up his bed on the Sabbath? Hey, Jesus, why? They were so caught up with following the letter of the law that they missed the Messiah that the law was pointing to. Paul addresses this in Romans chapter 10 and verse 1 through 4. My heart's desire and prayer to God for Israel is that they might be saved. For I bear them record that they have a zeal of God, but not according to knowledge. For they, being ignorant of God's righteousness, and going about to establish their own righteousness, have not submitted themselves to the righteousness of God. For the Christ is the end of the law for righteousness to everyone that believeth. So Paul said, there's so many people that are looking for righteousness. They have a heart for the Lord, but they're looking to go about it in their own ways. Israel had forgotten that the law and the prophets was pointing to Jesus. The law and the prophets were not the end. The law and the prophets were pointing to something. The cross is the dividing line for salvation. Salvation, before Jesus came to earth, was simply looking to the cross. Salvation now is looking back at the cross, but it's always been about the cross. It's always been about Jesus. And we get hard on the Pharisees. We get hard on the Sadducees and those that, the rich man that wouldn't follow Christ. But yet we do the exact same thing in the world today. We trust in our good works, or we trust in church attendance, or giving, or baptism, or all those other things, rather than trusting in Jesus. So there was no guile. There was no deceitfulness in him. He trusted the Messiah above the law, but also he asked the hard question. Nathaniel was willing to ask Philip a question that could have squashed his excitement, could have doubted the credibility of a statement, but he was willing to ask the hard question. Most people, when they come to know Christ, as they're on that journey to salvation, if you want to call it that, when you're witnessing to them or you're trying to present the gospel to them, if they're a thinking person, they're going to have questions. You mean I don't have to do anything to be saved? You mean Jesus died on the cross for me? You mean, and they're going to have questions. Don't be frustrated when you're trying to lead someone to the Lord and they have questions. If anything, be excited that they're engaged and they're thinking it through and they're asking questions. Nathaniel was getting ready to come to Christ. He was getting to the point where he was going to recognize Rabbi. But he asked Philip some questions. And remember this, next time you're witnessing to someone or a young believer is questioning you, remember who answered your questions when you were a young believer or before you got saved, and how they took the time, and maybe it was a Sunday school teacher or a mom or a dad or a relative, a friend, a pastor, and they took the time to open the Bible and say, here's the answer to that question. Any more questions? And remember how they were gracious to you and extend that graciousness to others. Lastly, Nathaniel's ministry. Nathaniel carried the gospel to unbelievers. And we see that's a consistent thread through all of the apostles, all the disciples. They were very different. They all came from all walks of life. They had all very different personalities. But after spending time with Jesus, they had to go and tell somebody else about it. And they all gave their lives with the exception of John on the Isle of Patmos, all gave their lives very brutally for preaching the gospel and sharing it with others. When we spend time with Christ, it ought to make us want to go out and share that with someone else. Eusebius Pamphilus writes, when a Greek theologian arrives to the continent of India, that he found some people that were already familiar with Nathaniel and the Gospel of Matthew. So we see that in a very short time, that the gospel is spread to literally all across the world because these men went out and preached the gospel to every creature, just as Jesus had asked them to do. The conclusion, what do we find with Nathaniel? Nathaniel's knowledge, his character, his following of the law could not save him, but the Messiah could. And he recognized that, and he trusted in Jesus above all else. He was a thinking man. He knew a lot of things, and there were probably some things some questions that he didn't have the answer to. And Jesus didn't give him the answer to everything. But he had faith to trust in Jesus, not the law, not his good works, not his knowledge. And we have the same opportunity. There's a lot of things that we don't know. How can God be 3 in 1? No idea. When is Jesus coming back? Not a clue. Why do certain things in the world happen? Beats me. But what I can do is have faith in him. I can have faith in his word and hold fast to the things that we do know. And that's what Nathaniel did.